Hello, this is Elena again, and I'm here with my bite-sized book review for Bewitchment by Amy Boyles. So the main character of this story is Clementine, or Clem for short. She runs a renovation business in a town called Peachwood. She also happens to be a witch and own a talking dog. So for me, the talking dog was actually probably one of the most fun parts of the story, since we have a dog too, and my sister and I often, talk about what we think we would react, or how we think we'd react if she suddenly started talking one day. And I guess as a pet owner, it's just fun to think about what your pet might think, even if I think, in reality, it's probably not very much. Well, anyway, so this story begins when Clem is hired by her kind of strange neighbor to renovate a barn that he just bought. It's just that her relatives and a couple other people feel like she should actually turn this job down because there's a lot of negative thoughts about this barn. Like, people believe that it drives people crazy because of something that happened there a long time ago. But Clem decides that she wants to take the job anyway, and then things get a bit complicated because basically they discover a dead body on the property that the barn is on, and they start to wonder if, maybe either the barn really does drive people crazy, or if the person who hired her might be a murderer. But anyway, so this story has three main plot lines. One is naturally the barn and the magic there. The second would be the murders, whether they're related or something else, and basically the investigation on that end. The third is on, I guess, prejudice in general, because there's these two people in town who are really intent on stirring up trouble because they're the kind of people who derive some kind of weird self-worth from basically hating different people and are trying to get everyone in town to be against people with magic. So this story turned out to be kind of different from what I was expecting. It was actually a lot less serious, probably because the whole thing with the barn actually wasn't a very main plot line. And I think for me anyway, it felt a lot less like a mystery and more like just a story about life happening. It's just it happens to be life for some, kind of odd people who lead kind of odd lives. So, for me, it was actually a very relaxing story that I could unwind with. One thing I would have liked is, I think the story does a very minimal amount of describing. So, I know some people don't really like descriptive stories, but I kind of do. And there were some details and information that the story didn't give you that I would have liked. And some of it actually made things a little bit confusing for me at some points. For example, when spells came up, so spells in here is not the same as just casting magic. They literally have objects that are referred to as spells, as I didn't know that. The first time it came up was when Clem's boyfriend pulled a golden spell out of a jar, and that was pretty much all they said about it. So it wasn't until a lot later in the scene when they did something, and I was like, oh, it has to be a sphere. Another incident would be how the story actually refers frequently to something called spell hunting. So for the entire first half of the book, I actually thought they were talking about doing research when this comes up, because it comes up quite a lot. Only it turns out actually when they say spell hunting, they literally mean going out to find spells, because people don't actually make spells in this world. You go somewhere, you do something with your vision, and then you see all these floating orbs all around you with writing on them. And for some reason, if you look really hard at the writing, you can kind of eventually read what the spell is. So you collect the spells that you want and you take them home. So it does imply that there's some method behind how you decide where to go to look for what kinds of spells, but it doesn't tell you. And actually for me, that kind of information would have been really interesting. So basically, there's a lot of stuff about the setting and the world and the structure that it doesn't bother to tell you, and sometimes that made things either a bit confusing or just, left things kind of unanswered for me, and I would have just liked more information. Though it should be noted that this is actually the fifth book in a series. Like, I have not read any of the other books. So it's possible this information came up elsewhere. But again, like, even for books in a series, I feel like there's some things, if they're really important, that could possibly be at least mentioned briefly to make things more easy to follow. But yeah, overall, I find the story to be very relaxing because there are no surprises and not a lot of stress, and so it's good for unwinding with.